Okay. Sorry about that. Going live. Do another session of grandmother drum storytelling here. To drum warm up the room a little bit. Just check in with you. A lot has happened since the last time I did this. I hope everybody's feeling okay. I got a little bit of like broken heart going on right now. It's hard to watch your country burn. It's hard to see the tensions boil over like this. And it's certainly hard to watch another black man be killed on the streets by a white police officer. That's a really tough thing to watch. And I understand when people are really upset. But I also understand that you can't just have unregulated violence in our streets, and we can't have looting, and we can't have people smashing up stores. As much as I understand why people are doing it, I understand that we have to come together somehow. I understand that we have to push through it. There's got to be another side. Well, I'll get a little more formulated on this. This is strange. I've been thinking about it for the past couple days, about how I might say this. It's just a really hard thing to watch. It's a really hard time in history for our country. Anytime you have National Guardsmen in the streets, especially if they're going to be taking up arms against fellow citizens, it means something's gone terribly wrong. So bear with me. We're going to explore that a little bit. And what I wanted to do to just get in the mood for this is to read a story by Langston Hughes. And if you don't know Langston Hughes, that's your assignment. Go look him up. Find out who he is. One of the greatest American writers. And if you haven't heard of him, you're in for a treat when you discover him. Rick, you say you're looking at the table. I think that's the drum, and I don't know why that is. Why is that like that? I better check that. Time out. Looking at the video equipment. For some reason, there's a delay. I'm gonna make sure. Hang on, people. I don't know what's happening there. Okay. I don't see it at all either. Well, we're gonna go. I don't get it. The camera says it's doing it. Rick, I don't know. You're hearing it but not seeing it. So, I don't know why I can't make this work. But I am really bad with this camera equipment. So here we go. Now you have to see it all in reverse. Makes it look like I'm left-handed. All right, let's get back into this. Warming up grandmother drum. There we go. Yeah, hard times. So as I was mentioning, Langston Hughes. I'm going to read you his story. It's a short story. It's called On the Road. He was not interested in snow. When he got off the freight one early evening during the Depression, Sargent never even noticed the snow. But he must have felt it, seeping down his neck, cold, wet, sopping in his shoes. But if you had asked him, he wouldn't have known it was snowing. Sargent didn't see the snow, not even under the bright lights of the main street, falling white and flaky against the night. He was too hungry, too sleepy, too tired. The Reverend Mr. Dorset, however, saw the snow when he switched on his porch light, opened the front door of his parsonage, and found standing there before him a big black man with snow on his face, a human piece of night with snow on his face, obviously unemployed. Said the Reverend Mr. Dorset before Sargent even realized he'd opened his mouth, "I'm sorry, no. Go right down this street 4 blocks, turn to your left, walk up 7, and you'll see the relief shelter. I'm sorry, no." He shut the door, and Sargent wanted to tell the holy man that he had already been to the relief shelter. He had been to hundreds of relief shelters during the Depression. The beds were always gone, the supper was always over. The place was full. And they drew the color line anyway. But the minister said no and shut the door. Evidently, he didn't want to hear about it, and he had a door to shut. The big black man turned away. And yet, he didn't see the snow, walking right into it. Maybe he sensed it, cold, wet, sticking to his jaws, wet on his black hands, sopping in his shoes. He stopped and stood on the sidewalk, hunched over, hungry, sleepy, cold, looking up and down. And then he looked right where he was, right in front of a church. Of course, a church. Sure, right next to a parsonage. Certainly, there would be a church. It had 2 doors. Broad white steps, in the night, all snowy white. 2 high arched doors with slender stone pillars on either side, and way up a round, lacy window with a stone crucifix in the middle and Christ on the crucifix in the stone. All this was pale in the streetlights, solid and stony pale in the snow. Sargent blinked. When he looked up, the snow fell into his eyes, and for the first time that night, he saw the snow. He shook his head. He shook the snow from his coat sleeves. He felt hungry, felt lost. He felt not lost. He felt cold. And he walked up the steps of the church. He knocked at the door. No answer. He tried the handle. Locked. He put his shoulder against the door, and his long black body slanted like a ramrod. He pushed with loud, rhythmic grunts, like the grunts in a chain gang song. He pushed against the door. "I'm tired, huh? Hungry, huh? Sleepy, huh? I'm cold. I got to sleep somewhere," Sargent said. "This is a church, ain't it? Well, huh?" He pushed against the door. Suddenly, with an undue cracking and creaking, the door began to give way to the tall black Negro who pushed ferociously against it. By now, 2 or 3 white people had stopped in the street, and Sargent was vaguely aware of them. They were yelling something concerning the door, and 3 or 4 more of them came running, yelling at him. "Hey," they said, "hey!" "Uh-huh," answered the big, tall Negro. "I know it's a white folks' church, but I got to sleep somewhere." He gave another lunge at the door. "Huh!" And the door broke open. But just when the door gave way, 2 white cops arrived in a car, and they ran up the steps with their clubs and grabbed Sargent. But Sargent, for once, had no intention of being pulled or pushed away from the door. Sargent grabbed, but not for anything so weak as a broken door. No, he grabbed for one of the tall stone pillars beside the door, grabbed at it and caught it and held it. And the cops pulled, Sargent pulled, and then most of the people in the street got behind the cops and helped them pull. "A big black unemployed Negro holding on to our church," thought the people. "The idea!" The cops began to beat Sargent over the head, and nobody could protested, but he held on. And then the church fell. It fell down gradually. The big stone in front of the church fell down. The walls and the rafters, the crucifix and the Christ. Then the whole thing fell down, covering the cops and the people with bricks, stones, and debris. The whole church fell down in the snow. Sergeant got up from under the church and went walking up the street with the stone pillar on his shoulder. He was under the impression that he had buried the parsonage, and the Reverend Mr. Dorset, who said no, and he laughed and threw the pillar 6 blocks up the street and went on. Sergeant thought he was alone, but listening to the crunch, crunch, crunch on the snow of his own footsteps, he heard other footsteps too, doubling his own. He looked around, and there was Christ walking along beside him. The same Christ that had been on the cross, on the church, still stone with a rough stone surface, walking beside him, just like he had just broken off the cross when the church fell down. "Well, I'll be dogged," said Sergeant. "This here's the first time I ever seed you off the cross." "Yes," said Christ, crunching his feet in the snow. "You had to pull the church down to get me off the cross." "You glad?" said Sergeant. "I sure am," said Christ. They both laughed. "I'm a hell of a fella, ain't I?" said Sergeant. "Done pulled down the church." "You did a good job," said Christ. "They'd have kept me nailed up on that cross now for 2,000 years. "Whee!" said Sergeant. "I know you're glad to get off." "I sure am," said Christ. And they walked on in the snow. And Sergeant looked at the man of stone. "You been up there 2,000 years?" "I sure have," Christ said. "Well, if I had a little cash," said Sergeant, "I'd show you around a bit." "I've been around," said Christ. "Yeah, but that was a long time ago." "All the same," said Christ. "I've been around." And they walked on in the snow until they came to the railroad yards, and Sergeant was tired, just sweating and tired. "Where you going?" Sergeant said, stopping at the tracks, and he looked right at Christ. Sergeant said, "I'm just a bum on the road, but how about you? Where you going?" "God knows," said Christ, "but I'm leaving here." Then they saw the red and green lights of the railroad yard, half veiled by the snow that still fell out of the night. And away down the track, they saw a fire in the hobo jungle. "I can go there and sleep," said Sergeant. "You can?" said Christ. "Sure," said Sergeant. "That place ain't got no doors." Outside the town, along the tracks, there were barren trees and bushes below the embankment. Snow gray in the dark. And down among those trees and bushes, there were makeshift houses. They were made out of boxes and tin and old pieces of wood and canvas. You couldn't see them in the dark, but you knew they were there if you'd ever been on the road, if you had ever lived with the homeless and hungry in a depression. "I'm sidetracking," said Sergeant. "I'm tired." "I'm going to make it to Kansas City," said Christ. "Okay," said Sergeant. "So long." He went down into the hobo jungle and he found himself a place to sleep. He never did see Christ no more. About 6 a.m., a freight came by. Sergeant scrambled out of the jungle with a dozen or so more hobos, and they ran along the track, grabbing at the freight. It was dawn, early dawn, cold and gray. "I wonder where Christ is right about now," Sergeant thought. "He must have gone way down the road. He didn't sleep in this jungle." Sergeant grabbed the train and started to pull himself up into a moving coal car, over the edge of this wheeling coal car. But strangely enough, the car was full of cops. And the nearest cop rapped him on the knuckles. Wham! The nightstick. And he wrapped his long black hands for holding on to the top of the car. Wham! But Sergeant did not turn loose. He clung on and tried to pull himself up into the car. He hollered at the top of his voice, "Damn it, let me in this car!" "Shut up," said the cop. "You crazy coon." And he rapped Sergeant across the knuckles and punched him in the stomach. "You ain't no jungle now. You ain't no train. You're in jail." Wham! Across his bare black fingers clinging to the bars of his cell. Wham! Between the steel bars low down against his thighs. Suddenly, Sergeant realized he really was in jail. He wasn't on no train. The blood of the night before had dried on his face and his head hurt terribly. And a cop outside in the corridor was hitting him across the knuckles for holding onto the door, yelling and shaking the cell door. They must have took me off to jail for breaking down the door last night, Sergeant thought. That church door. Sergeant went over and sat on a wooden bench against a cold stone wall. It was emptier than ever. His clothes were wet, clammy, cold, wet, shoes sloppy with snow water. It was just about dawn. And there he was, locked up behind a cell door, nursing his bruised fingers. The bruised fingers were his, but not the door. Not the club, but the fingers. You wait, mumbled Sergeant, again black against the wall. I'm gonna break this door down too. Shut up or I'll paste you one, said the cop. I'm gonna break down this door, yelled Sergeant. He stood up in his cell. Then he must have been talking to himself because he said, I wonder where Christ has gone. I wonder. Has he gone to Kansas City? Langston Hughes on the road. Now here's the deal. You talk about why would people riot like that? Why would people be so upset about this? Langston Hughes died in 1967. He wrote this story in the 50s. This is 2020, 60, almost 70 years later. And Sergeant is still being turned away. Sergeant is still walking down the street cold, tired, and hungry. Sergeant is still sleeping in the hobo jungle. Sergeant is still looking for justice, looking for peace. Sergeant's still getting thrown in jail. Sergeant is still in pain and suffering. I gotta tell you, brothers and sisters, this is a hard time to be an American. And I gotta tell you, some of what really hurts, for me personally, to see friends and people I know, I didn't see them comment about the death of George Floyd. But I saw a lot of comments about rioting and looting. Let me just say this about that. If you didn't say anything, and if it didn't disturb you about what happened to George Floyd, then you probably shouldn't be commenting about any of this other stuff. Just my opinion. And here's what we got to do. You got to listen to me. But I've been thinking about this. And we can demonstrate, and we can yell, and we can get our frustrations out. And I'm all for that. But there has to be substantial policy change. There has to be a different way of doing things. So, when we're looking at our priorities, if we really want to get to the bottom of this, maybe next time, instead of tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires, we're going to look to invest in our schools. We're going to look to invest in our communities of color and our low-income communities, and we're going to say, we're going to give these people a fighting chance. We're going to change policy to address the gross inequality. We're going to work together to come up with solutions so that we don't see our cities in fire again. It just crushes me to see this anger boil over like this and then to see this response. I'll tell you what almost made me cry was a picture of 60 cops kneeling down, taking a knee, a full-on Colin Kaepernick knee in front of a line of demonstrators. don't think cops are bad people, but I do believe there are bad cops. I don't think demonstrators are bad people, but there are some of them go astray. But I also think there's agent provocateurs, there's people trying to take advantage of these situations. Let's just keep our heads about us. Most of all, if you're going to a demonstration, if you're going to be somewhere, making a statement, check your heart first. Make sure it's in the right space. Make sure that you're coming at this with your heart. I said it before, and I'll say it again. If you need the answer to a really difficult question, ask your heart. That's where we got to go. We have to approach this from our heart. So, homework again, if you missed it. If you don't know Langston Hughes, look up Langston Hughes. Read some of his poems, read some of his stories. And above all, wherever you're going, go with your heart. Love you guys. I love the people that are out there. You got a legitimate reason to be there. You got things to say, things that need to be listened to. It's time we did that. Until next time. Peace. Now you have to see it all in reverse. Yes. Is that hard?
Yes.
Boy.
I could not talk. So it's hard.
So it was hard?
Yes, talk. I'm a talking machine, Mark.
You are a talking machine.
Mark, someone's knocking.
Someone knocking at the door.
No, someone's talking in my phone.
Somebody's ringing the bell. Do me a favor. Open the door. And let them in. Yeah, yeah.